Hi, this is Dina for Splitcoaststampers. In this tutorial, I'll show you how you can use your die cutting machine to press clay and then create pendants or ornaments. For this project, you'll want an air drying clay like the creative paper clay I used here, or another similar brand that doesn't require baking. I also have some Teflon sheets that I've cut down to the size of my Big Shot cutting plates. I get these on Amazon and they're pretty inexpensive. I've cut about 3 ounces of clay, which is a good amount to work with. You'll want to work the clay a little bit to soften it, and then form it into a flat disc to run through your die cutting machine. On my Big Shot, I have the platform closed, then a Teflon liner, the clay, and then I'm going to lay an open embossing folder onto the clay so the positive or raised design presses into the clay. I'll run that through. And this is what I get. The clay residue on the folder can just be rinsed off with water. It comes off very easily. I'm going to use a cookie cutter to cut out some shapes for ornaments. If you don't have cookie cutters, you can do some freehand cutting or trace a shape with a craft knife. The next step is to cut a hole so the piece can be hung, and I like to use a coffee straw to do this. The clay will collect up inside, and you can either squeeze it out or just cut off the end of the straw when it stops cutting as well. One final step here is to smooth the edges with your finger. They'll be a little bit rough at the bottom, but they'll smooth out very easily. If you miss this step, you can always use sandpaper to smooth them out when they're dry. I wanted to share one other method of adding a pattern to the clay, and that's with a background stamp. To press the clay this time, I have the platform open to tab 1, and then I'll put Teflon sheets below and above the clay and top this stack with a cutting plate before sending it all through. And that will give me an evenly pressed piece to work with. I'm going to lay the clay onto a background stamp, and you may want to prep this stamp with Versamark ink, but I didn't do that here. I'm using my brayer to gently press the clay into the design of the stamp, and this particular background has a mainly negative design, so that will be pressed into the clay and the open areas will be raised. Once that's prepared, I'll cut out a few shapes and give each a hole for hanging, and then all those pieces will be laid flat at a warm, dry place until they're completely dry. And the time will vary depending on where you live. Just follow your package instructions for the best results. And I also like to turn the pieces every few hours so that they stay flat and dry evenly. To color this piece, I'm using Colorbox Colorique, which is an ink product that has beautiful results on clay. You can learn more about it in the review by our product focus team at Splitcoaststampers. You can also use acrylic paint for this technique if you don't have the Colorique. I wanted a more muted green here, so I added in a little of the orange to make more of an olive color. And what I want to do here is fill in all of the depressed areas with paint. So all these leaves and the roses. I'm using a flat or chisel brush, which works really well for getting down along those edges. And also I'm not worrying about getting paint on the raised areas. That'll be fine. I just want to be sure the impressions are all filled. When that's done, I'm going to use a baby wipe to wipe across the surface of the piece. That's going to give a blended color to the raised areas and give definition to the design that's pressed in. The more you wipe, the lighter your background color will be. You can also use the color on the baby wipe to cover the edges of the piece. I'm using a little Colorbox pigment ink here to distress the edges of my piece just a little bit. And then as a final step, I'm going to seal the piece with a Colorique sealant. And for this step, you can use any clear varnish or glaze. For my second piece, I wanted to create the look of terracotta pottery, so I'm brushing on some pigment ink with a clarity stencil brush. And you could use paint here too, but I like how the brushing leaves some lighter areas and picks up the pattern from the stamp. I want to highlight the raised areas, and the best tool for getting all those accurately is a finger with just a little ink and a very light pressure. Then I'll lightly brush the edges as well and give it a coat of sealant, and that's it. I've got a couple of ornaments or maybe gift tags, and smaller shapes could be used for necklaces as well. Thank you so much for watching.